Welcome back. The New South Institute has launched a groundbreaking report, the first in the new series, Government in Numbers. This data-driven report takes an in-depth look at shifting demographics within South Africa's public administration. To explore the impact of this demographic shift, we'll focus on the age profiles of three major government departments, that is the South African Police Service, the National Department of Health, and also looking at the Department of Education. Joining us live to unpack the findings and to discuss the implications is Yoliswa Makhasi, who is a representative for the New South Institute. Yoliswa, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Let's start off by defining and also articulating why there was a necessity for such a report and what the intention behind it is.
Thank you, Aldrin, and good morning to you and your listeners. I think that the first issue to raise is that the New South Institute is a policy think tank that works within South Africa and the Global South, and so is preoccupied with research and making inputs into policy processes that relate to a number of areas, including public sector reforms. So you would know that the South African government is implementing a program on professionalizing the public service. The president, in maybe past 2 or 3 sonas, has really raised a number of suggestions and inputs on how we can improve in terms of professionalizing the public service. So we thought, as the New South Institute, as part of our role is to ensure that there's evidence-based research that supports the public sector reforms work that is taking place in the country and in Africa and in the Global South. So from that perspective, we then used the data, the personal data that we have through an MOU with the Department for Public Service and Administration, and we use that data to look at a number of trends that are taking place in the public sector. And one of those trends relates to the report that we issued on the aging public service. There's other series of policy briefs that are going to come on a number of other areas that we're going to present. So basically, the aim is to bring evidence-based research in supporting the case for professionalization in South Africa, because what we've noticed is that, yes, there's policy, yes, we've been talking about professionalization, but we're quite thin on evidence-based research in respect to this area of work.
And when it comes to age in general, what does it tell us about the public servants with those 3 departments that we've just mentioned now?
The clear message we're getting is that there is a decline in the number of young people in the public sector, and it's across all departments: police, basic education, as well as the Department of Health. And this has been confirmed yesterday on the day before yesterday, apologies, on Wednesday. This has been confirmed by representatives of these departments who were part of the launch that we have with the report. They've confirmed that there is that declining numbers of young people, and it is a concern. We had the general from SAPS, who is responsible for corporate services, who highlighted some of the means they are putting in place. Whilst the numbers of young people are reducing, the numbers of older people, the age that's going to retirement from 50 and above is increasing. So you're going to have, in the next 5 to 10 years, if you don't address that issue, you're going to have a serious gap of a higher number of people who are exiting the system and a higher number of young people who are declining because they are not being recruited in large numbers into the system, and it will create a vacuum in the system.
Yeah, we just had a conversation now with the Institute for Security Studies, and I raised this point specifically when it comes to the police. And as Lizette has pointed out, that at least with the police, they are able to recruit young people in high numbers. But the point that she stresses is that you need to have a healthy balance between the more experienced people who have age, who are then able to mentor those that are supposed to come through into the system. But if those people are not appointed, while you still have the seniors in the system to actually mentor them, what does this mean for that gap that is then left open?
Well, that gap definitely affects service delivery, and I agree. And the DDG from SAPS, the general from SAPS, also raised the same issue that they are bringing numbers into the system, but those numbers are not sufficient. So they have to bring in more numbers. They have a project called Project 10,000. But so far, they've not been able to get 10,000 new people every year into the system. They've been able to get 4,500 to 5,000 young people. So at least if they can maintain that 10,000 into the system, it would really create a difference. The other problem is that on average, people who are in junior management at SAPS are 50 years and above. So if you have a situation where people who are in junior management are 50 years and above, you can imagine people who are in senior management, what's happening there. So that's another gap that they need to close, because it means those who are at lower levels are unable to grow and move to the next levels, because those who are in those next levels, the junior management, they are camping there, they are not moving to the next levels or exiting the system.
Yeah, and the important point here as well is with the debate, Yoliswa, that is currently underway around the bloated wage bill, the push also to have government reduce its wage bill, but the conversation not necessarily focusing on whether we have the right people appointed in the right positions and whether there should be a reconfiguration that takes place. Because what's evident from the report as well is that we actually do need the warm bodies in the state.
Certainly, we need warm bodies in the state for service delivery purposes. The three departments that we looked at are really the arteries of public service. They enable functioning of the public service. So if you don't have the numbers, and we are insisting that those numbers must really, a majority of them must be young people, because you need to close the gap of the declining numbers of young people. The issue on whether our wage bill is bloated or not, I think that that's a matter for another discussion. And when we talk about the wage bill, we must also look what are the inputs into the wage bill. One of the decisions in 2000 South Africa took in year 2000 was to introduce occupation-specific dispensation, which is really almost like paying consultancy rates to certain professions within the public service. So we need to look at whether how impactful is that and how effective it is that, and is it the best method in which we can use, because it has ballooned the wage bill one way or another. But beyond that, I think that the increases that public servants have been receiving over years cannot really be referred to as overburdening the state, because the public servants are employees who must be remunerated for their work. However, we have to ensure productivity of public servants, because if they are not productive, then they should not be getting the salaries that they are getting, and they should be exiting the system so that people who are prepared to work can come into the public service and work. So there's work that needs to be done around improving the performance management system and improving methods to manage and encourage productivity amongst public servants.
Yeah, and just quickly on that point as well, with the early retirement severance packages that are offered, the intention there normally is to try and reduce the wage bill. Is it possible to have a similar program with the intention of actually bringing in younger employees into the system?
Certainly, there should be a similar program. The government has an internship program, for instance, that the last time I saw statistics, it took about 20,000 or so young people in a year to do different roles. But the weakness of the internship program is that it is not targeted. So, and you can build even more volumes in terms of numbers, in terms of that program. There's quite a number of programs that require consolidation and being targeted. And the other question is, what happens after the internship? After the young people have spent 24 months in government, in a government department on an internship, what happens to them after that? The other problem is the organizational structures in departments that do not allow for entry-level young people to come in large numbers at professional levels, but entry levels, because there has been a concentration over time into outsourcing certain roles and responsibilities, and people get in through tenders to do certain roles and responsibilities that could be done by young people who are entering the system at entry-level professional roles and groomed and developed into the different roles in the system itself.
Yeah, the nature of South Africa's public servants is also a bit complex in that we also have a high unemployment unemployment rate. And recently, was it last year, the president had also come has also come out in support of the removal of a 35-year cap for new employees into the system because of this high unemployment level that we are facing in the country. But how do you do that also without coming across as being ageist? And some people reading and looking at this and saying that, oh, it means that the state doesn't want to employ older people, even though these are older people that can actually contribute to the system.
There is no one who's saying older people must not be employed in the public service. But when we talk about younger people, we must not be comparing younger people with older people. The main point that we are raising is that you have a much better advantage by bringing in young people in the public service. And there is already older people in the public service, and older people are coming in the public service all the time because the mechanisms currently are in favor of older people. You must have experience in this and that. But I must also acknowledge that there's been progress in the public service because for lower level positions, I think it's levels 1 to 6, which is your entry level positions, there is no requirement for experience if a position is not a supervising position. So young people are able to come into those roles and responsibilities. But of course, the unemployment problem is bigger. It's not only going to be solved by employing young people to government. So as NSI, we're not saying employ young people in government in order to solve the unemployment problem, but we're saying employ young people in government in order to rejuvenate the system, in order to ensure that there's new cultures and new values that come into the system that ensures productivity. And as you prepare for a new public service, because the public service that you're working with now is kind of an old public service and is very established in terms of how it's doing certain things, and it may not be as productive as it is required to be.
Yeah, and finally, to what extent, if at all, did you find out one of the reasons perhaps behind seeing this large number of older people being employed in the system? And does a conversation around not having enough money to retire, considering the cost of living, play a role in that decision of the older people saying that I want to continue working for the state up until I reach my retirement age?
I think what the state needs to consider is to really develop a number of policy options that enable those people who may be regarded as older, 55 and above, who want to exit the system voluntarily to be able to do so. So you have to look at a number of early retirement packages and other options or policy tools that do not penalize them from a pension perspective, those who want to exit. So that's a very important issue. The issue of funding came across as very strongly as well in the workshop that we have from the 3 departments, because what they are saying is that the funds, the budgets that we get given are not sufficient as much as we understand the problem, but we do not have the funding to address the problem. So there is a funding issue that we need to attend to. So I hope that as older people exit through whatever policy packages that government may bring in, that gives government an opportunity to bring in more young people in large numbers. But how that is done must be coordinated, and it must also be part of a bigger program around professionalizing of the public service. So it's not just employing a person to come into the job, but the values you are teaching that person, the culture you are introducing that person to, and the support that you are willing to give to that person is very important, so that we can sustain them in the system and they can be productive. So they just don't get in the system as it is now and disappear in the system itself.